Hello and welcome to the new season of the Drawn and Redrawn, the Making of India's Internal Boundaries podcast. This is a part of a larger India State Stories project that explores the evolution of India's political and administrative boundaries. This project is an undertaking by the Centre for Legislative Education and Research at Flame University in Pune. In this new season, we embark on a journey through the fascinating histories and narratives of each Indian state and union territories, exploring the pivotal events, influential personalities, and societal transformations that have shaped the subcontinent. In this 14th episode, we look at the story behind the formation of State of Karnataka. This episode is based on a corresponding article written by our team at India State Stories. These articles have been converted to audio conversations with the help of Google's Notebook LM. You can find the relevant article link in the show notes. Now, let's dive into the conversation.
You know, when we look at a map of India today, especially a state like Karnataka, it feels permanent, ancient almost. You see that distinctive shape and you think of Bangalore, Mysore, Hampi, and you just sort of assume this landmass has always been Karnataka. But the more I dug into this, the more I realized that's just completely wrong.
It's a really common misconception, actually. We tend to project the present onto the past. But if you were to go back in time to, say, 1940 and ask for Karnataka, you'd probably get a few confused looks.
Not because the idea didn't exist, but
because the political entity, the state itself, it just wasn't there.
Exactly. It wasn't one single block of land. The metaphor that kept coming to my mind was a jigsaw puzzle, a huge, complicated jigsaw puzzle that somebody just, dumped out and kicked the pieces under different tables.
That's a wonderfully vivid way to put it.
Yeah.
And it's accurate. That was the reality for a Kannada speaker in the early 20th century. You weren't just living in a different city, you were in a completely different administrative universe.
You could speak Kannada.
But you might be a subject to the British Crown in the Bombay Presidency, or the Nizam in Hyderabad, or, of course, the Maharaja in Mysore.
What a mess. So, okay, our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear then. We need to figure out how these scattered pieces, 5 major ones and a bunch of little ones, were found and stitched together to create the state we see on, Google Maps today.
And it's so much more than just drawing lines on a map. I think that's the key thing. This wasn't just some bureaucratic exercise. It was, at its heart, a story of unifying a people who felt like their identity had been sliced and diced by colonial rule.
So we're connecting the dots between language, culture, and then finally, the borders.
That's the goal.
Okay, so let's unpack this. I think the average person, and I'll include myself here, usually assumes Karnataka is just the old kingdom of Mysore that got a bit bigger, but you're saying Mysore was just one piece of this puzzle?
Precisely. A very important piece, maybe the anchor piece, but still just one of 5 distinct ingredients. If you only look at Mysore, you're missing, more than half the story.
So before we get to the actual map making in the 50s, where did this idea even come from? Was it a politician in Delhi who just decided to reorganize the South?
Surprisingly, no. The push didn't come from the top down at all. It came from the bottom up. And this is where it gets really interesting, I think.
Oh.
The movement for a unified Karnataka, the Ekikarana movement, it was cultural long before it was political. It really started in the minds of poets, writers, journalists.
That's fascinating. So the pen really was mightier than the sword here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You have to talk about people like Alluru Venkata Rao. He's widely known as the father of Karnataka Ekikarana. And he wasn't a politician looking for votes. He was an intellectual who saw that the Kannada people were having this deep identity crisis.
An identity crisis? How do you mean?
Well, think about it. If you lived up north, you were governed by the Bombay Presidency, so you're a minority in a Marathi-dominated world. If you were in the east, you're under the Nizam, a minority in an Urdu and Telugu environment.
So pretty much everywhere except Mysore, your language was secondary.
You were a guest in your own home, in a way. And Alluru Venkata Rao and others, they realized that unless these people were brought under one roof, the culture could just erode over time.
And that's where institutions like the Kannada Sahitya Parishad come in, the literary council.
Exactly. They used literature to build that collective identity. To tell people, look, it doesn't matter who you pay taxes to right now. If you speak Kannada, you're part of this family.
And this all starts way before 1947.
Much earlier. The Indian National Congress actually accepted the whole idea of linguistic states, that states should be based on language, way back in 1920 at their Nagpur session.
1920, that's almost 30 years before the British left.
Yes. And by 1927, the Congress had passed a formal resolution suggesting Karnataka could be its own province. So the seed was planted very, very early, but, going from a seed to a tree can take a while.
Okay, so we have the dream, the Ekikarana dream. Let's get to the reality. 1947 comes, India is independent, but we don't get a Karnataka right away. We get piece number 1.
Correct. We get Mysore State.
And this was the territory ruled by the Wudiyar dynasty. Was that a messy transition?
Actually, no. Compared to, Kashmir or Hyderabad, Mysore's integration was pretty smooth. The Maharaja signed the instrument of accession in August 1947.
So he just signed on the dotted line, and that was that.
Pretty much.
Okay.
By June 1949, the agreement was updated to give the state legislative powers, though the center kept things like defense and taxes. At that point, Mysore became what was called a Part B state.
A Part B state. Sounds very bureaucratic. What does that actually mean?
It was just a classification for former princely states. It meant they had a Raj Pramukh, who was usually the old ruler, instead of a governor. And at that time, Mysore was just 9 districts.
Only 9. Modern Karnataka has, what, 31 now?
Exactly. And that's the aha moment.
Yeah.
Mysore was the cultural heartland, no doubt, but it was geographically small. It didn't include millions of Kannada speakers just across the border. It was the starting block, but just the start.
Right. It's like a family reunion, but you only invite the people in the main house. So when do the rest of the pieces finally show up? When does the map actually change?
The big turning point is 1953. The government of India sets up the States Reorganization Commission, the SRC, chaired by Justice Fazl Ali. This was the moment the government finally said, okay, let's do this. Let's rationalize the map based on language.
Okay, so the SRC gets to work. Let's build this puzzle. We have piece 1, Mysore State. What's piece 2? Where does it come from?
Let's go north. Piece 2 comes from the Bombay Presidency.
British territory.
Yes, a huge province. The southern part of it was heavily Kannada-speaking. This is where we get the districts of Belgaum, Dharwad, Bijapur, and North Kannada.
And these areas had a different kind of feel to them, right?
A very different vibe. The Bombay Karnataka region was a real hotbed of the freedom struggle. They brought this very fierce political consciousness to the new state.
Okay, so we got Mysore in the middle, Bombay districts to the north. What about to the east?
To the east is piece number 3, Hyderabad State.
The Nizam's territory.
Exactly. Another princely state, but very different from Mysore. The administration was Urdu-influenced. The legal systems were almost feudal. From here, the new state gained Raichur, Gulbarga, and Bidar.
That's a huge piece of land.
It is. And it brought its own unique culture, but also its own set of administrative challenges, which we can get into.
So that's 3 pieces. What about the coast? You can't have Karnataka without the coast.
And that brings us to piece number 4, the Madras Presidency.
Another British province.
Yes. From them, the new state got the coastal district of South Kannada, what we now know as Mangalore and Udupi, and also the Bellary district. This was huge. It gave the state access to the sea, a whole maritime culture.
Okay, so that's 4. What's the 5th and final major piece?
Coorg, or Kodagu.
Ah, Coorg, the land of coffee.
And warriors. Coorg was a fascinating case. It was a tiny, centrally administered Part C state with a very fierce, distinct identity. There was a lot of debate about whether it should just stay separate.
Like its own little micronation.
In spirit, yes. But the SRC eventually decided, for administrative reasons and because of the linguistic links, that it should be part of the unified state. So Coorg became piece number 5.
Oh, wait, I remember reading there was also some, what should we call it, confetti scattered around.
Confetti is a great word for it.
Yeah.
Yes, it wasn't just these big blocks. You had these tiny little princely states dotted within these areas, places like Jamkhandi, Mudhol, Ramdurg, Sivanur, and Sandur.
I heard of Sandur.
Right. These were tiny pockets of princely rule that had to be legally absorbed into the bigger districts. It just shows you how incredibly fragmented the map really was.
So you take Mysore, you take the bits from Bombay, Hyderabad, Madras, and Coorg, plus the confetti. You shake it all up, and on November 1st, 1956, you get a new map.
That is the date, November 1st, 1956. The state suddenly has 19 districts. It was a massive, massive celebration for the Ekikarana movement.
It sounds like a triumph.
Yes.
Just ask. You don't redraw a map like that without making someone angry. There had to be friction at the edges, right?
Oh, absolutely. When you draw a line based on language, you hit a problem. Language doesn't stop at a neat line. The borders are always fuzzy.
And the biggest friction point, which is still in the news today, is Belgaum.
Yes, the Belgaum or Belagavi dispute. This is a reality check. The SRC put Belgaum in the new Mysore state, But the city and the surrounding area had a very significant Marathi-speaking population.
And Maharashtra wanted it.
Of course, Maharashtra claimed it should be theirs. The final decision put it in Karnataka, and this became a huge, huge point of contention. It led to protests, political standoffs, legal battles that are technically still ongoing.
And just to be clear, for everyone listening, we're not taking sides on this. We're just reporting that this dispute was a direct result of that 1956 reorganization. It's like a scar from the surgery.
That's a very fair way to put it. It shows that while the big picture was solved in 1956, the details at the border could be incredibly contentious.
On the other hand, you had the case of Bellary, which seemed a bit more scientific, maybe?
Bellary is a great example of the SRC trying to be surgical. The district had a mix of Kannada and Telugu speakers, a true bilingual zone.
So how did they decide? Flip a coin.
No, they actually split it. They went sub-district by sub-district or taluk by taluk. The Kannada majority taluk stayed with Mysore State. But the areas that were mostly Telugu-speaking were cut off and transferred to the newly formed Andhra Pradesh.
Wow. So they really got down to that granular level to draw the line.
They had to. If language is your main metric, you have to follow the demographics, even if it means slicing a historic district right in half.
So we get to 1956, the map is drawn, the pieces are together, but there's one thing still missing, the name.
Right. And this often surprises people. For almost 20 years after this huge unification, the state was still officially called Mysore State.
Which seems a bit weird. I mean, if you're in Gulbarga or Darwood, areas that were never part of the Kingdom of Mysore, calling your state Mysore must have felt, well, alienating.
It did. It felt exclusionary. The name Mysore pointed to one specific royal history, one geographic area. For the people in the north or on the coast, it felt like they'd just been annexed by Mysore, not that they'd formed an equal partnership.
It's like a corporate merger where two big companies join, but they just keep the name of one of them. The other employees are going to feel like second-class citizens.
That's a perfect analogy. They felt their own long struggle for unification wasn't being honored by the name.
And so, enter Chief Minister Devaraj Urs.
Yes, a pivotal figure. On November 1st, 1973, 17 years to the day after the state was formed, it was formally renamed Karnataka.
Why Karnataka? What's the significance?
The name itself has ancient roots, but in 1973 it signified an embrace of the entire Kannada-speaking territory. It was a neutral, inclusive umbrella. It was the final emotional seal on the deal.
Okay, so 1973 settles the name, 1956 settled the map. But this is where I want to go next, because I think it's the most fascinating part of this. We see the lines on the map and think, job done. But you mentioned something that really stuck with me, the ghost of borders.
Ah, yes. The ghost of borders. This is the stuff that, public administration nerds like me find absolutely gripping.
Explain this. When we think of borders, we think of a line on a map. But you're talking about something invisible.
Think about it this way. On November 1st, 1956, the map changed overnight. But the laws didn't. You suddenly had one chief minister trying to govern 5 different legal systems at the same time.
Wait, what? The laws didn't automatically unify?
No, it takes years to rewrite laws. So the districts from Bombay were still running on the Bombay Police Act. The districts from Hyderabad were using the Nizam's revenue system. Some records were in Urdu, land was measured differently. Madras had its own framework. And Mysore had its own laws.
That sounds like a bureaucratic nightmare.
It was chaos. Absolute administrative chaos. Imagine being the head of the police. Your officers in Belgaum are following one manual, your officers in Bangalore are following another. Or think about land reform. A farmer in Darwood is subject to a completely different set of rules than a farmer just a few hundred kilometers away in Manya.
So unification on the map was just step one. The real grinding work was harmonizing all these systems.
Exactly. We call it administrative integration. And it took decades. The state had to create uniform land codes, uniform education acts, unified university rules. This was the silent, unglamorous work of state building that happened long after the parades were over.
It really makes you appreciate that Karnataka isn't some natural thing. It's a constructed reality, built file by file, law by law.
It absolutely is. Those invisible lines of the old presidencies, Bombay, Madras, Hyderabad, they persisted in the bureaucracy long after they were erased from the map. Even the work culture in government offices was different depending on where they came from.
That is wild. So what does this all mean for us today? When we look at Karnataka now, we see a tech hub, we see diverse culture, but we're really seeing a historical collage.
We are. And that's the relevance for you, the listener. When you travel through Karnataka, the differences you feel aren't just random. The dialect of Kannada in Darwad is different from Mysore. The food in Mangalore is so different from the roti-based diet in Gulbarga.
Or even the architecture.
Yes. The architecture, the festivals, the local customs, these are the living echoes of those 5 different pieces. Unification brought them under one political roof, but it didn't. And it shouldn't have erased their unique histories.
It's incredible to think that what started as a dream by poets in the 1920s went through the chaos of 1947, got a map in 1956, and finally got the right name in 1973. A very long road.
A very long road. And it's a powerful reminder that political boundaries are never static. They're drawn and redrawn by people, by movements, by culture. We think of maps as fixed things, but this story shows us they're actually fluid, living documents.
Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. It certainly changes how I'll look at that map next time. It's been a fascinating journey through time and territory.
It has. And if I could just leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Please do. That's why we're here.
We talked about those administrative ghosts, the different land laws and systems from Bombay, Madras, Hyderabad. My question for you is this. To what extent do those invisible lines still shape daily life in Karnataka today? If you were to dig into a property dispute or local bureaucracy right now in 2025, would you still find the shadow of the Nizam or the British governor of Bombay dictating how things work? Are the lines on the map truly gone, or are they just hiding in the paperwork?
That is a thought that will definitely stick with me. Thank you all for listening to this episode of Drawn and Redrawn.
Thank you. And remember to check the show notes for the link to the full article from the India State Stories Project. It's got maps that really help visualize all these pieces we talked about.
See you in the next deep dive.